Morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me here today. Today's good news, and it's good news because of you. It's a day that I think many of us have been looking forward to for quite some time now. And I want to say a special thank you this morning to Team Manitoba for all that you've done, for all you've shown each other and the country through your strength and your empathy and your courage and your resilience as well. I want to say on behalf of Manitobans to all the families who have suffered a loss, whose lives have been impacted by COVID-19, not just here obviously, but around our country and around the world. We're thinking of you, and we know that it is especially difficult at this time to say goodbye to people as a community when you can't even get together to say goodbye. But we can offer support to each other, and that's what we've been doing. And I congratulate you again. You stuck to the fundamentals. And those fundamentals are what will take us forward as they brought us to this point today. I want to thank also the people of Manitoba under this stressful time for their calm and their kindness, and for keeping themselves safe and keeping others safe too through their actions. But I also want to say this isn't a victory lap. Today's a celebration because of what you've done, and tomorrow will be a celebration because of what you'll continue to do. There is no room whatsoever for complacency against COVID-19. It is an adversary that is nefarious, sneaky, and dangerous, and we have to stand up to it. There is no room for complacency. There must be no COVID comeback in our province. You'll determine the future actions that we take, just as you determined the actions that we are announcing today. Thank you for the actions that you have supported us taking today through your own actions in protecting yourself and one another. Our number one priority during this pandemic has been to keep you and your loved ones safe. And that took some tough steps, let's face it. We've had mom and pop shops forced to close their doors and lay off their people because of this pandemic. We have had customers who have obviously not been able to be customers as a consequence of the actions that we've had to take. We've had moms and dads forced to take time away from their workplace or be laid off from their workplace, and now becoming teachers. If they weren't already, they have been in the last few weeks partners in the education of their children more than they might have been in the past. And for many, many of us throughout Manitoba, we have borne this pandemic in a way that we might never have anticipated before this year, through stresses, strains, and separations that have made life, well, challenging, to put it mildly. We have to ensure that we continue to do some of these measures, and we have to ensure that we do them with dedication, because that is how we will protect each other, how we'll protect our employees in our stores, how we'll protect businesses, how we'll protect customers. We need 100% commitment from Manitobans. It has been hard to do that, but it will remain hard to do that in spite of the announcements today. And I want to say as well that a critical element of our flattening measures that we have taken together so far has been our high levels of testing, our high levels of tracking, and our practices of isolation as well. Un élément essentiel de nos efforts d'aplatissement jusqu'à présent, ce qui a contribué au succès de Manitoba, ce sont de niveaux élevés de tests, de suivi et d'isolement. But these early and decisive actions that we took as a province, along with your hard work and dedication, have made a difference. Your efforts to help flatten the curve have brought us all to the point where we can gradually start to get back to business in Manitoba and reopen our communities as well. So I want to say again, thank you for the diligence you've shown. Thank you to you, because today we are announcing the restoration of safe services together. I want to be clear, this is not an announcement about a return to normal. not right away, because the normal will be a new normal. You can't step into the same river twice, and things have changed. And so the new normal, for now and for a long time to come, is what we are facing the challenges of addressing. We need to keep working hard. We need to keep working hard to protect our most vulnerable people by reopening our economy in a safe and a measured way. This is a Manitoba plan. It is made for Manitobans. It is made by Manitobans, and it will allow us to move forward with confidence. Today, I am pleased to announce that effective Monday, May 4th, a number of non-essential businesses will be able to open their doors. These will include non-urgent health services, dentists, orthodontics, and physiotherapists. As well, and I know this will be a great relief to many Manitobans, we will be able to reopen elective surgeries. I know many Manitobans have been patiently waiting for important procedures to be done, and I know it's been difficult for you, and I thank you for your patience. We'll also ease restrictions on outdoor recreation, such as playgrounds, golf courses, campgrounds. We encourage Manitobans to continue practicing physical distancing and safely enjoy our beautiful outdoors while we continue to move through the phases of this pandemic, together, but at safe distance from one another. We are also easing restrictions on a number of retail businesses, such as clothing stores, sporting goods stores, restaurant patios, and hair salons. I would mention of all the things that Dr. Roussin and I have agreed upon, this is one area where we don't agree on the priority level. For some reason, Dr. Roussin and I disagree on this one. I'm joking, of course, and you'll figure out why when you ask Dr. Roussin about this specific issue. But as I've said, it won't be business as usual. For now, it'll be a new normal. Travel restrictions will remain in place for the time being. We are still restricting gatherings to no more than 10 people. Depending on the results of this next phase, we will consider increasing the size of gatherings as early as mid-May. But based on public health advice, we should not expect in the foreseeable future to see large gatherings or events like concerts or festivals. That will not be realistic for some time. In order to work towards easing these restrictions, as I've said before, and I'll say again, we must remain vigilant and we must remain committed. We do not want a COVID comeback. We need to keep following Dr. Roussin's wise orders for social distance, wash our hands frequently, stay home when we're sick, and if you have symptoms, call HealthLinks, Info Santé at 204-788-8200 or toll free at 1-888-315-9257. We'll continue to be successful if we keep working together as a team, and I believe Manitobans will do exactly that. As I have said before, you don't learn about a team much when you're on a winning streak. You learn about a team during challenging times, and these have been and will continue to be challenging times. But what we have learned about Manitobans is emboldening. It's inspiring. And so again, I say thank you to Manitobans. Thank you for your sacrifices during this unprecedented time and for the sacrifices you will need to continue to make. Every generation has had to face challenges. Every generation, and this generation has to face this pandemic. This may be, for many Manitobans, for many Canadians, the greatest challenge they have ever had to face. Some of you have lost your jobs. All of you have been worried about the health of yourself and loved ones. You've been kept apart from your family and friends. You've sacrificed your freedoms, precious freedoms, for the good of each other. But remember, as we make this recovery happen, you are the reason that it's going to happen. The reason for these measures, the reason we can move towards recovery. Your security and your protection is the inspiration. Not every Canadian is given the opportunity to save a life. This generation of Canadians has been given that opportunity. And I say, you have saved lives. You can save lives in the future as well. We will save even more. Together we'll beat this thing. Ensemble, nous vaincrons la COVID-19. Thank you. I look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. A reminder to our reporters online, you will have one preliminary question and one follow-up. Up first, from the Winnipeg Sun, Scott.
Hi, Scott Billick, Winnipeg Sun. Premier, I'm just wondering, and you kind of joked about it earlier about maybe a little bit of, I don't know, discontent's not the right word, but between you and Dr. Roussin, what were the challenges between, if any, between what he wanted and what you wanted in terms of reopening, especially in this first phase, and were there speed bumps, I guess, that you guys had to iron out?
I would say that I was joking about the follicle challenges that the doctor faces, and we've joked about that together, so that's an inside one. But the fact of the matter is that it's about time for a trim for a lot of us. That's the one area we might have had different priorities on, but I think we've agreed on virtually everything else through this process. Certainly, we have been encouraged to follow the lead of our health professionals in respect to the protection measures we've taken. We were, because we were later in the curve, perhaps, than other provinces, among the last of provinces to restrict movement and to restrict trade and behaviors directly related to commercial activity. But we were among the first in terms of educational initiatives and promoting behaviors like distancing and self-isolation. Because of that early action, directed by Dr. Roussin and others, we've been able to take these actions today. And so I think it's a consequence of the early actions, the advice, and listening to it. And Manitobans, again, deserve to be praised for that. And I think Dr. Roussin very much, and Ms. Siragusa as well, deserve to be praised for their consistent advice to us and for their transparent and open behavior towards how they've dealt with this issue.
And just my follow-up, and people are going to look at some of these like hair salons and stuff like that and wonder why, tattoo parlors or estheticians or that sort of thing can't be open at the same time under the same sort of rules that have been set out. Why is that?
Well, it's because every business is different, and I suppose the dangers to people of certain businesses are greater than of others. It's a difficult call, but we've made that difficult call because it's the right thing to do. We believe that with the protocols that we have developed, which are very extensive, you will review those, but they're very extensive. Others are under development in certain sectors not open today or not announced to be reopening today. We've had tremendous partnership from people in the business community, in particular in the small business community, through their organizations and individually. Our MLAs have reached out and got tremendous amounts of input, and that input is integral in our plan. Our Made in Manitoba plan has truly been designed by Manitobans.
From CBC Radio-Canada, Patrick.
Bonjour, M. Pallister. Patrick Foucault, Radio-Canada. Just to follow up again on that last question, can you tell us how can we basically ensure proper social distancing in services that involve very close contact with clients, like
Patrick, I've lost you, but I'll try to answer the question I think you should have asked, if that's all right. The question perhaps you were getting to was, how can we ensure the safe conduct of businesses where the providers have to be in closer contact with their customer? I think that was what you were going to ask me. I'll just say this. The distancing practices and requirements in the protocols for behavior in dealing with customers are very detailed, and we are going to be stepping up our inspections to make sure that they are followed. We have great support from the business communities, and their advice has been that the people who run these businesses want to do the right thing for their customers. That's not a surprise to me. I come from the small business world, and I can tell you, people want this to be a sustainable reopening. And so they are going to do everything they can to protect their customers in every way. These protocols have been developed after extensive consultation, and we believe that when enacted, they will serve to protect the customers of these businesses, whatever they may be, retail establishments, patios offering services, food services, or hair salons. Either any of these businesses will be able and must practice the safe distancing and other strategies to offer safe services to their customers.
That was my question. Thank you very much. Sorry
Okay.
for the bad quality. I'll try another question if you can't hear me well. Is there some sort of coordination between provinces when we prepare those plans like the one you're introducing today? And if so, how?
Well, in numerous ways. Provinces have been communicating with one another throughout this process, and I wouldn't say exclusively provinces, also the federal government, also other levels of government. In fact, I'll be in meetings with more than 20 municipal governments by the end of the week. So coordination has been vital to the planning, but I would not want Canadians to be confused or Manitobans to be confused that we need to have a one-size-fits-all approach from coast to coast. We're a diverse country, and we're all of us doing the very best we can in each of our jurisdictions to make sure we're focused on safety, but we're looking, all of us too, for the sweet spot where we can reintroduce or regrow our economic and quality of life to make sure that we have that balance. Total security is never a realistic goal, but we have focused largely in the early stages at every provincial level and federally on protecting the health and well-being of Canadians. Now we need to also find the balance with restoring our economic activity and quality of life.
From CBC Manitoba, Bart.
Bart with CBC Manitoba. Mr. Premier, restaurant patio services are coming back on May 4th with capacity restrictions. How is that going to work given the potential for people to get pretty close to each other in that environment in the summer?
Yeah, it's a great question. The protocols on restaurant reopening, and of course, I think every restaurant owner would like to reopen, but they all understand in that industry that safety first, and they don't want a reopening, closing kind of thing to happen. So that's why the protocols will be followed in restaurants. For example, there's no buffets, there'll be no grabbing condiments by hand, distance and separation, limited capacity in terms of seating, and outdoor only. Initially, all of these and many other measures will be adopted in order to ensure the safety of patrons and the safety of staff too.
And also, there are, on phase 2, I'm looking at the guidelines, and there's on the website portion, it states that may come back. Can you talk about the monitoring that will take place between May 4th and June 1st that will determine whether those second phase reopenings occur?
Sure. Yeah, well, that's essential to understand. I hope that everybody understands it, but I'll say it. We must not allow for a COVID comeback. And so we'll be monitoring, obviously, as we do, and as the doctor reports on an almost daily basis, case numbers, and making sure, because of the importance of sustaining this reopening, we can call it, or the loosening of some restrictions, the importance of being able to sustain that is fully contingent on also protecting the health and well-being of our citizens. So we want to make sure that we're always monitoring. There will be not only, I alluded earlier, Bartley, to inspections and supervision and conduct oversight, but I think that, of course, the biggest thing is the results, the outcomes. And so stabilizing, flattening that curve is going to continue to be our focus, and any future loosening of restrictions is going to be contingent on achieving those outcomes.
From the Canadian Press, Steve.
Steve Lambert from the Canadian Press. Premier, you talked about beefing up inspections, and I know your government has brought in or has the ability to bring in conservation officers and the like to enforce these measures. But as more retail stores and restaurant patios and these sorts of things open across the province, how many extra bodies do you have on the ground to make sure that not only customers but workers as well are protected? Yeah,
well, actually, Steve, we've done a fair bit of redeployment. We've stepped up in terms of the numbers. I don't have those in front of me, but I do know that there are already some plans that have been enacted and others that will be. There are a variety of categories of people, and what I want to be clear on is these are not people who don't have experience in giving a ticket or in overseeing the activities of others. We're not putting people into a brand new role they're not equipped to handle. So it'll be redeploying some people that have less need for their services in other areas of government that we can move over into these areas that will be part and parcel of this. In addition, I should emphasize, though, that a big part of our success in Manitoba has been respecting people enough to just educate them first before we hand them a ticket. Give them some information, make sure they understand why these behaviors matter. I could get into a few too many things here, Steve, but I'll just say, I'll give you parks as an example. We also have plans to do additional cleanup activities, antiseptic treatments, a variety of things there to make sure that the facilities are safe. With playgrounds, similar precautionary measures need to be reminded. I think families need to be reminded to keep taking those. Distancing is still always preferable, even though children can play outside and would like to intermingle. I expect it's important that they use the facilities, but they do respect as much as possible the distancing requirements the doctor has always laid out, and I'll keep laying out as well.
And you mentioned in your opening statement about the 10-person limit might be raised somewhat at some point shortly after May 1st. I just want to double check. Are you thinking about raising that limit sometime in the May or June period? Given that some restaurant patios, for example, even 50% capacity can fit more than 10 people.
Well, the group gathering and the restaurant capacity, two different issues. The fact of the matter is, on the group gathering numbers that have been largely, I'll give an example, restricting the ability of people to attend a church gathering, to have a christening, to stage a wedding, to have a funeral. We have been talking about potentially looking at that, given that the results of our curve flattening exercise continue by mid-May, potentially to 25 at that point or some point thereafter.
From CTV Winnipeg, Jeff.
Hi, Mr. Premier, Jeff from CTV Winnipeg. I'm wondering, opening playgrounds and then maybe eyeing potentially down the road, sports and things like that for kids. Why not school? Or is that just you couldn't control the physical distancing enough?
Yeah, I think you've answered the question in part, Jeff. Our kids are precious to us. We have, we're in the early days of this recovery. The intensity of the presence of a large number of kids in a school makes social distancing all but impossible. It's a tough issue because we see the numbers, and the numbers are principally impacting less on young people and more on older people. How's that? And so there might be a temptation to say, let's lessen these restrictions. But to be quite frank, we're into May next week here. You've got a few weeks to monitor the situation, and then you're into June. It's the last month of the school year. For that reason, we're not entertaining the idea of reopening the schools at this point in time.
Thank you for that. And there may be some, I know you brought in the legislation, but there may be some people who are scared to go back to work if they can. Mm-hmm. Can employers, can they force people to go back to work with easing restrictions? Or if I don't feel safe going back to work, am I protected?
Well, you're protected presently by the actions we're taking in a broader sense. Actually, the fact that we're reducing the COVID curve and that we are taking the actions we're taking today should give evidence to Manitobans that we're not through this marathon yet, but we're making good progress. And I would urge workers who have unfortunately had to be laid off or seen their hours reduced to consider going back to work. I would urge, and we have been doing this, those who feel ill or in any way feel they may have symptoms to go and be tested. I would urge them to go to our websites, go to the COVID-19 website, get information there. Don't be afraid, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Be responsible. And so with the rules that we'll have in our small business community, when businesses call and say, would you like to come back to work, I'd encourage Manitobans to do that rather than sit at home and take a check from any level of government for not working. It would be better to work in the long term and in the short term. So I'll encourage Manitobans to do that because without that assistance, without that labor, some small businesses may have difficulty reopening, and that won't be in anyone's best interest.
From City News, Stephanie.
Hi, Mr. Premier, Stephanie Lasuk with City News. As you open campgrounds and parks, there's typically that temptation for people to gather in group sizes of more than 10 people. There's a lot of shared bathrooms. I'm just wondering what the province is going to do to make sure that, gatherings are restricted within those areas and that people are safe when they're using the facilities in that area.
That's a great question. Leaving the campgrounds closed is something I'm sure that some may say we should do, but the fact remains that we have a beautiful province that we can enjoy, and right now I think a lot of families would really appreciate having a little outing with their kids, for example. So we're stepping up the oversight there. We're stepping up the cleaning. We're making sure that the protocols are followed. There's educational material going to be made available to everyone. And look, the temptations are real wherever you are, I suppose, to gather in big group numbers. But I'll say again, don't do it. Don't do it. It's dangerous. And I think most people have behaved in a responsible way, and they understand that. And I don't think that they'll lose that knowledge, and they'll change those behaviors when they go to a campground either. We'll reopen the campgrounds for registration on a limited basis next Monday. They'll be spaced appropriately, and we expect the people there to space themselves appropriately as well, so we can make sure there's no COVID comeback in this province. That's what we're after.
Thanks for that. And then just a follow-up, as we reopen restaurant patios and the like, is the message still to be only going to those patios with people within your household, to only see people within your household, or is it now that we're starting to reopen, acceptable to be visiting those restaurant patios or other places with people from outside your household?
Well, again, the rules and the protocols are there to protect you, to protect employees, and frankly, to protect the business and its sustainable reopening. So we expect the rules to be followed. In respect of the numbers, they're limited. They're going to be limited by the capacity of the facility to accommodate the social distancing. And when you take a look at the protocols that are going to be followed by these facilities, I think it should give confidence to Manitobans that not only should they feel safe in going and using these facilities, but they'll know that the staff is also safe and that they can keep each other safe.
From the Winnipeg Free Press, Carol.
Good morning, Premier. It's Carol Sanders of the Free Press. Wondering about businesses and services that can reopen next week for parents who run those businesses or work at those services. What's happening with daycare availability for those parents?
Yeah, it's a great question, Carol. We have significant actions that we've taken as a government to accommodate initially the needs of our emergency frontline medical personnel. And I thank the daycare industry for accommodating on a reduced basis, because we did, as you know, have to reduce the capacity maximums at the daycares in the interests of both the children and staff there. The response was tremendous. We were able to then broaden the daycare focus out to all emergency personnel, and now we will need further assistance to accommodate those in the private sector who will have an opportunity to go back to work but would want to have good quality childcare for their children. We have additional capacity not yet being utilized up to the 16 child limit in the daycare facilities, and so we'll be looking for the daycare facilities to accommodate these additional needs and assist, as they always have, those who need the services they offer.
And my follow-up question is about enforcement, and I'm wondering about, we were talking about Manitobans will listen, and a lot of times they just need to be educated. But is there a policy now for when a fine should be issued versus when a warning is issued? Can you talk about how strictly the lifting of the restrictions will be enforced?
they'll be enforced, and it's sad that they have to be, but they have to be. The vast majority of people have behaved responsibly throughout this. That's why we're able to make these announcements today. But there are some who, for some unknown reason, perhaps selfishness, have decided that they are above the requirements the rest of us are abiding by. And so these penalties are real. There have been fines imposed already. Numerous warnings have been given, and educational material continues to be distributed more widely to make sure that we're reducing the number of incidents. That being said, we're stepping up that enforcement, and we've added and are in the process of moving or deploying a variety of employees in the civil service to accommodate this, along with the support of great volunteers and people in the communities around the province and in the city, like the Bear Clan and others, to help us to get the word out on the importance of making sure that people are educated about doing the right thing and reminded to do so.
From Global, Brittany.
Good morning, Mr. Premier. Brittany from Global. As we're starting to ease some of these restrictions, what about families who want to go hug a grandma or grandpa and get together in small groups, maybe less than 10, having them over for a barbecue? Is that something that's going to be allowed now?
Well, it is, and again, I think it's a question of using your judgment and common sense here. If you have a fragile family member, make sure that you recognize the importance of due diligence and be cautious. It is not a time to take unnecessary, undue risks. I recognize, obviously, as a family person myself, the challenges that families are facing right now in terms of wanting to be together, wanting to support one another. There are other ways to do that more safely than a backyard barbecue. Consider those ways as an option. But the restrictions are there for a reason. Restrictions will continue to be in place in our personal care homes. We've been blessed to not have the incredibly depressing statistics that have plagued other jurisdictions. To know that 3 out of 4 deaths in our country or more are in personal care homes is tremendously sad. That being said, we need to continue with our due diligence, and we will continue with it in respect of the personal care homes. There'll be more to say on that later this week.
Thank you. And I know you briefly touched on childcare, but with more and more parents wanting to go back to work or being able to go back to work, school not going to be an option for the next few months. How many extra childcare spots do we have, and can we accommodate what is going to be needed for these families?
I think my Minister, Heather Stephenson, can give you the detail. I think I'll ballpark at Brittany and say I believe we have about 1 in 5 spaces on that are available right now. So there is some additional capacity there. Clearly, while schools are out, there's a bit of additional capacity on babysitting, so there's that as well. There are resources out there. We've also invested $18 million in encouraging. We've had significant support now from people wanting to start up a smaller daycare service. So there is some expansion happening, never as fast as I'd like, and I do hope there's an incredible need for daycare, because that would mean people are able to go back and work who want to work. But that being said, we are taking steps on many fronts to partner in the development and, in fact, in the growth of daycare centers and daycare facilities in our province.
From the Brandon Sun, Drew.
Thank you. This is Drew May from the Brandon Sun. Mr. Premier, what kind of criteria is the province looking at to move into phase 2 of the plan? Because I see that it says no earlier than June 1st. So what kind of things would need to be satisfied before we get there?
Well, to be, I guess, brutally frank, we need to have we just cannot afford to have a big upswing in the number of COVID cases. And, as much as we are upping the testing significantly, and I think what will happen as a result of that, this is conjecture, but I believe there will be a lower percentage of COVID cases per test determined, because we're broadening the testing out to include a number of people who would be in generally lower risk categories. But because of the significant additional testing, we might also see an uptick of some kind in the number of COVID cases. We will know that only in the future. And so for that reason, these commitments are only commitments in theory that will only occur after phase one as a consequence of the results meriting them continuing. In other words, public safety first, opening up the economy, loosening restrictions second.
Thank you. And just to follow up, but in phase one, will the checkpoints at the Saskatchewan border continue, or will those be phased out at some point?
Well, we all hope they'll be phased out at some point, but they're going to stay there for now because that need is still there. We need to make sure that we distribute information when people return. We have been, I don't have science on this. I know that some snowbirds decided to stay where they were and not come home, but at some point this is a beautiful place to be. The grass is getting greener, the sun's coming out, the temperature's going up, and there's no better place to be than Manitoba in the summer. And my wife would say, I should also say in the winter, but that's a difference my wife and I have with one another on that. In any case, I would say that there's going to be some snowbirds coming back to Manitoba, and they need, if they are landing in another province, they're going to need to be educated on the vital importance of self-isolation, and that's what we've been doing at the borders, along with other educational initiatives. That's what we've been doing for the protection of snowbirds, the protection of others, the protection of our province. That is not going to stop.
From CJOB, Diana.
Good morning, Mr. Premier. Diana from 680 CJOB. You have kind of touched on this already, but just to be clear, with the gathering size still at 10, are people okay to now gather in smaller groups? Of course, your messaging previously was don't socialize with anyone from outside your household, but is it okay for friends to get together in kind of groups of 3 or 4 at this point?
I don't want to step in and get the doctor in my head. He's the one who's been giving this advice and repeating it, and I'm trying to do the best I can to reinforce what he's been saying. I can only say that your judgment is critical here, as we've gotten where we are today only because of it. And so I would again urge people, as I think the doctor will do, to suggest that you be very, very careful about bringing people into your household and introducing new elements of risk that weren't there before. That being said, the rules are what they are. I can tell you I was heading down a suburban street the other day, and I saw something I thought was kind of cute. It was a cul-de-sac-ish kind of street, and there were lawn chairs along the street. I think there were about 6 of them, and people were sitting 6 feet apart on either side and across the street from one another having a party. Now, some might argue that's not safe. I would say, well, they were on the boulevard, they weren't endangering anybody, and they were having a great time. So there are different ways to get together and do social distancing. Look for those and do them and enjoy them. It's a beautiful time of year. It's great to be alive, and it's a great chance to enjoy each other's company. Do it wisely.
And just as a follow-up, obviously with the reopening and in the first phase included things like more diagnostic procedures, elective surgeries, and dentists. We're obviously going to need a fair bit of PPE here for those things happening. How is the province ensuring that everyone is protected? If they're a dentist, if they're a doctor, how's that going to look for kind of securing PPE? Do we have enough?
Never enough, and it's a problem right across the world. So let's be frank about it. I mean, it's no secret that protective equipment is in short supply and in incredible demand. And so our teams have been working diligently from the outset. We were the first province to sign on to partner with the federal government on procurement of protected gear, but we had worked before that, and we've worked diligently since. Our team of civil servants has largely been leading this effort, but they've been partnering somewhat with other provinces and with the federal government to get the equipment that we need. But I would say, let's go back a second and just remember that what the effect of these services being available will be to the people of Manitoba. People who've been suffering with a toothache, for example, and didn't want to call it an emergency, haven't been able to go and see a dentist. Now they can. Children, parents who wanted their children to be able to play in the playground just down the street weren't advised to do that. Now they can. If you wanted to take an outing with your family to go to a museum, you couldn't go. Now you can. If you needed physio, you couldn't get it. Now you can. If you wanted to just have a break and walk down the street and maybe have an IPA on the patio of a restaurant, you couldn't do it. Now you can. These changes are big for people to get back to enjoying the quality of life that Manitoba offers them, for families, for all of us. But again, this is not a victory lap. We're in a marathon, not a sprint. And so be careful out there and do the things you need to do to protect yourself and one another. That's the key to making this work.
From CTV National News, Jill.
Premier Pallister, it's Jill Makashon with CTV National News. In talking, just with some colleagues right now, it looks like this might be the most aggressive reopening plan in the country, barring the schools that we're seeing in Quebec. Was there any discussion with the federal government? I know you said that you've been working collaboratively with the federal government as well. Was there any cautions that the federal government sent out to you in this ambitious plan?
Yes on the dialogue, no on the cautions piece, Jill. I would say this. I think there's a recognition, the Prime Minister's expressed this, that we're not a one-size-fits-all country. And so there's been a respect shown to the provincial governments for the hard work they've done. And I would say, quite frankly, that Canadians, present company accepted, I'm not commenting on our performance here, others may, but I would say across Canada that the people of Canada have been very well served by their governments, both at the provincial level and the federal level, in terms of their willingness to communicate, their willingness to coordinate. Look, this isn't going to change our squabbles and disagreements on things occasionally. That's the nature of Canada. That's the nature of the Confederation. But during this time, there's been tremendous cooperation, and I think that's very important. For us in Manitoba, last in on restrictions very close to the end, criticized by some for that, but the science didn't dictate that we needed to be the first in. The curve was not what it was in other jurisdictions. First out, yes, but I wouldn't use the word aggressive. I would use the word thoughtful and balanced and reasonable and science-based. Those are words that I would use because that's how we've been doing our plan from the start, and that's how we're going to continue to do it. Manitobans are the ones who deserve to be credited for this announcement today because Manitobans made it possible. Couldn't have been made possible without the behavior of Manitobans in respecting the need to protect themselves and each other.
Thanks for that. And just as a follow-up, I know you mentioned, younger kids and distancing in schools would be difficult. What about universities? I mean, could there be the potential for university classes to resume over summer where that distancing could happen with, obviously adults?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and it's one that's underway. Discussions have happened, they'll continue to happen with post-secondary institutions. The challenges are not entirely the same as a grade 3 class, for example, but there are some similarities for sure. And I know that given the unemployment levels, I think the demand on our post-secondary institutions in terms of enrollments is very likely going to increase. It's going to rise, and we've taken that into account in terms of our work-sharing proposals and the programming that we're going to be announcing next week. But I would say that there is no doubt that where we'd all like to get to is a fall where we can resume some sense of normalcy. That being said, as I said before, you don't step into the same river twice, and the things have changed, and so practices will need to change as well. So I'll be announcing in the not too distant future a transitional group that I'm pulling together to really step up the planning for how we come out of this successfully, not just in private sector business, but in academia, post-secondary institutions, K-12, in terms of our public and our private sector conduct, in terms of other issues like economic growth and development opportunities. And I'm very excited to see that exercise and the group of people come together who I think can really help us position Manitoba as a resurgent and resilient province, which it of course is.
From the Flin Flon Reminder, Cassidy.
Hello. Yes. With the opening of campgrounds specifically, we have a lot of campgrounds above the 53rd parallel. Will that see a bigger emphasis put on enforcement of the travel ban?
Well, you've raised two issues, Cassidy. I think the campgrounds rules, as far as provincial facilities is concerned, I can speak to that specifically. Our plan is to upgrade the information distribution, oversight, and ensure that people using those campgrounds are safe. We'll be opening up registration for our campgrounds next Monday. We're going to be limiting the capacity, as would naturally, I think, be assumed given the distancing requirements that we all have to comply with. Private campgrounds have different protocols. They'll be expected to follow those for the safety of the people who use them as well, and they will correspond in many respects, most respects in fact. Yes, you're right. We've incredible beauty in northern Manitoba. We want people to be able to share it, and so we're trying to facilitate making sure that happens safely.
And is it possible that some of these phase 2 and further phases could come at different times between north of the 53rd and south of the 53rd?
You know, we're a complex province, Cassie. I can only tell you that all these phase 2 items are contingent on success coming through the next few weeks. And I know that where we've gotten so far is because of, in large part, our willingness to follow the discipline rules and requirements that have been given to us, and that has to continue for us to move on from there.
From CHTM, Navi.
Good morning, Navi Ball with CHTM. Mr. Premier, in regards to the reopening of non-essential retail businesses, particularly for small and medium-sized businesses who want to reopen but don't think they should due to not having the proper PPE or, like, for example, plexiglass that we see the chain stores have. So how are they supposed to go about doing that? Do they take it from, like, the aid program? Are they on their own and they have to purchase it for themselves? Is something going to be rolled down the line where they are able to access it? Can you speak to that a bit more?
Yeah, no, it's a very, very legitimate concern. I'll start with the workforce issues. Obviously, the loosening of these requirements doesn't force anybody to open. Small businesses will do what they think is right in respect of their openings, and they'll need staff to do that. We are fighting against a federal program that is actually paying people to stay out of the workforce right now, and I don't like the fact that that is real, but that is real. People are being paid to stay home and not. I also realize employers have told us, small businesses have told us, they're fighting against a federal student program that actually pays people to not work and not look for work. This also is a disincentive. We have introduced programs provincially that are the most generous in our province's history to offer gap support to small businesses so that they'd have the resources to assist them in getting back open. We've also introduced the most generous summer employment program in the history of the province of Manitoba, and I'm encouraging young people and small businesses to work together to create opportunities. Perhaps you could create some opportunities in your business by hiring a summer student. You get a 50% subsidy for that, and having the student oversee the protocols that you want to use in your business so that you can stay open and so you can make sure your customers and employees are safe. Just an idea. We are really focused on trying to help Manitobans get back to work and have a resilient and safe economy here, and that's where we'll stay focused.
And sort of as my second question here, I just want some clarification regarding yesterday's announcement about expanding testing. I believe the Dynacare lab in Winnipeg will be taking care of it, but there seems to be some sort of, I guess, miscommunication or of some sort with healthcare unions in terms of whether that testing is being directed to Winnipeg or if it's being directed to Brampton. Are you able to clarify as to which it will be?
Well, I got to be frank here. I'm really happy that we're able to potentially by the end of the summer triple our testing capacity and ramp it up. And I think Manitobans are most concerned about being able to get tested when they need it. And I think employers and employees and customers of our small businesses want to know that they can get those tests done and get them back and get the results. And I don't think they really care where the testing is done, quite frankly. But I am excited to hear that Dynacare is ramping up employment opportunities and expanding their facility here in Manitoba. That's great. They'll create jobs here. I'm pleased with that. But mostly, I think what Manitobans care about is results. CADM is full to capacity. We needed additional capacity for testing. We've got it now. That's great news. Just want to say thanks to everybody. Thank you for your ongoing work. Thank you for following the directives and abiding by them. Remember, your work is what allowed us to make this announcement today, and your work has to continue. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon, and we need to keep to the fundamentals so we can keep making progress and make sure that there's absolutely not going to be a COVID comeback in the province of Manitoba. Stay safe. Together we're going to beat this thing.